You confessed it, maybe years ago, you said the words, you meant them, and somebody told you it was finished, and the chart didn't drop. That's the part nobody explains. You can believe you're forgiven and still flinch when the memory comes back at 2 in the morning. You can hold both. Most people do. In the letters at the end of the New Testament, there's a name for the thing that keeps reading your file out loud, and John gives it plainly. Day and night. That's the schedule you already know. Now, here's what I want to put in front of you. That accusation isn't noise, and it isn't only psychology. Something is being made out of it. The oldest initiation texts in Europe say your unredeemed life gets a form, an actual shape with an appearance, and that you will stand in front of it. You'll meet it at the door. So 3 things in the next quarter of an hour. I'll show you what the thing is made of, and it isn't your sins. I'll show you why the man who hates himself most is the one least able to get past it, and I'll show you what forgiveness actually removes, which is not what you've been told, what happens to a soul that won't forgive itself. That's the question, and the old books answer it in a way nobody teaching this today will tell you. Let's start with the honest version of the problem, because the usual advice fails on contact. You've heard it, God has already forgiven you, so let it go, release it. Who are you to hold on to something God has dropped? And that's true, and it does nothing, and everyone who's tried it knows it does nothing. You can't decide to stop. The people who most want that instruction to work are exactly the people it doesn't work on. Look at why. The advice treats guilt as a mood, something in your feelings sitting there waiting to be talked down. So the whole remedy is aimed at the feeling, feel different, feel forgiven, but you're not feeling something, you're carrying something. John knows this. He writes to people who are already inside the church, already absolved, and he still has to address the heart that keeps convicting them. He doesn't tell them the heart is lying. He tells them God is bigger than the verdict. That's a different sentence. It concedes the accusation has weight. So the question isn't how to feel better. The question is what's actually still there. Here's the answer the mystery schools give, and it's stranger than either side of the argument you've been having with yourself. What you did was given a body, not a memory, not a mark, in a ledger, a form. The deeds you never made good got gathered up into something with an outline, and that something stands between you and the world you're trying to get into. In the initiation literature, it's called the guardian. It has one job. It stands in the doorway and it decides you're not ready. Now, you can hear that as a metaphor and file it. The texts are emphatic that it isn't one, and they describe it speaking. When it speaks, it tells you where it came from. Read that last phrase again, because it's doing something clever. The ledger is the image everybody already has. Debits, credits, a balance owed, and the text takes the ledger and makes a garment out of it. The entries didn't stay entries, they got worn. And then it says the thing that changes the whole problem. Reason out of him into an independent life. It came from you and it isn't you anymore. It has its own existence and it runs whether you attend to it or not. Now, you already know this from the inside, you've just never had a word for it. Your guilt doesn't wait for your permission. You don't schedule it. It arrives on its own, it has its own timing, and it says the same 3 sentences it always says. Anything that behaves like that is not a mood you're having, it's a thing that's having you. And this is where I have to be exact with you, because the temptation is to make this sound bigger than the source allows. This meeting is described as an initiation experience, something a living person does deliberately under training. It's not primarily a death scene, but the same book says the untrained meet it anyway, and it tells you when. Everyone arrives at that door, some people arrive at it awake. Now the first reversal, and it's the one I'd keep if you forget the rest. You'd assume the barrier is built out of what you did. That's the whole architecture of shame. The worse the deed, the higher the wall, and a bad enough act builds something you'll never climb. That's not what the text says. It says the threshold is made of something else entirely, and the guardian names the material, fear every shrinking. The wall is built out of your unwillingness to own the thing and not out of the thing. Sit with what that means practically. 2 men do the same wrong. One of them turns around, looks at it, says, I did that, it was mine, and it's on me to make it good. The other spends 30 years unable to look at it directly, flinching every time it surfaces, calling the flinch remorse. The second man's wall is higher. Not because his act was worse, because he's still shrinking, and the shrinking is the masonry, and the same passage tells you the form isn't fixed. It responds, it reacts to you continuously. So the thing at the door is live. It's being worked on right now by you today. And here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. Self-condemnation is a way of working on it. Every hour you spend hating who you were is an hour of construction. You're not paying the debt down, you're building. Which brings us to the failure mode, and it's the most specific thing in this whole literature. Some people get to the form, see it, and stop. They don't turn back and they don't go through. They settle. They make a life in front of it. And the text says something about those people that I've never seen anywhere else. Rich beyond all measure. That's the trap. And you've watched it work. You know a man who organized his entire personality around one thing he did. He's articulate about it. He's been in the wound for 20 years and he's found things down there, and some of them are real. It reads as depth, it reads as honesty in a world full of people who won't look at anything. He'd tell you he's the only person he knows who has actually faced himself. He's standing in front of the door describing the door. Jung says the same thing from the other direction, and he's careful about it. He calls the shadow a moral problem that takes the whole personality to face, and he says it has a kind of autonomy. It acts on its own. It isn't a passive thing you own. That's a psychologist arriving at the same structure by a completely different road, and he warns that facing it is where people stall, because the shame is heavier than they budgeted for. The stall looks like a rival. That's what makes it dangerous. A load he drags about with him, and some men learn to call the dragging a personality. Now, the hard one. I'd rather not say this next part gently, because saying it gently would waste it. Refusing to forgive yourself is a form of self-love. I know exactly how that sounds. It sounds like an insult aimed at people in real pain, and it isn't. So let me make it precise. When you can't stop turning your own failure over, who is at the center of the picture? You are. The harm you did, the person you hurt, the world that has to keep going, all of it has quietly moved to the edge of the frame, and your own moral standing is in the middle. You've made your guilt the subject. The inner path is supposed to be the cure for that. The texts warn that it can be the opposite. A nature force, not a flaw, something with the strength of weather. And the same book puts the choice in one line, and I want you to hear how small the difference is. Brooding or transforming. Same material, same memory, same hour of the night. One of them makes something and one of them makes nothing. And from the inside they feel almost identical, because both of them hurt. Eckhart is blunter about the mechanism. He says God can only fill what's been emptied, and a man full of himself has nowhere for God to go. It doesn't matter whether he's full of pride or full of shame, he's full. The accuser doesn't drop the charge because you're the one still holding it up. So is remorse the problem? No. And this is where I have to give the feeling back to you, because I've just spent 4 minutes taking it apart. Remorse has a job. The texts are specific about it. They describe what happens after death as a review, and it runs backwards. You go back through your life from the end toward the beginning, and when you reach an event, you don't get your own side of it. 60 years old, and he's back at 40, standing inside the pain he handed somebody. And the point of that is not punishment, it's manufacture. The text says the old desire gets consumed in what it calls the purifying flames, and what comes out the other side is the force you'll need next time to do it differently. So the burn makes something, remorse is fuel, which tells you exactly what's wrong with the 2 in the morning version. You have all the fuel and nothing attached to it. No deed, no repair, no call you're going to make, no changed hour tomorrow, just the burn running connected to nothing. Combustion with no engine bolted to it, and you've been doing it for years and calling it taking responsibility. And an engine that never turns has a consequence. The Guardian says what it is, and this is the one place the old books get very hard. I'm reporting what the text says, and I'm not going to argue the doctrine with you here. Take it at its lowest reading and it still holds. Whatever you leave unfinished keeps pulling you back to itself. You've watched a man return to the same year of his life for 40 years. Same argument, same grievance, same room. He isn't living forward, he's being drawn back to an unfinished thing. Over and over because it's still calling. Christ said the same thing, and he said it as a matter of timing, whilst thou art in the way with him. Notice he doesn't say the adversary is behind you, or ahead of you, or waiting somewhere. You're walking with him. Right now, on the road, in company, and the whole instruction is about doing it early while you're still moving together, because the alternative is a courtroom and a bill. That's the window. It's open while you're walking. Now, most people carrying this describe it the same way. A wall. Shame going up like a wall and the light not getting through anymore. God on the far side of it, unreachable. I've heard that description 100 times, and I understand why it's the natural one. It's also the one place the mystics flatly contradict the experience. Bohm spent his life on the question of why the same fire is joy in one soul and agony in another, and his answer has nothing to do with a wall. Nothing was blocked. The light is exactly where it always was, at full strength, and that's the reason it hurts. Bohm's whole point is that the torment is the presence of God in something that hasn't turned toward him yet. Same fire, the turned soul reads it as warmth. The unturned one reads it as burning. He works this out from the hardest case he can find, which is the fallen angel, and his reasoning is worth following because it's mechanical. That being was made for heaven. It still has the divine substance in it. And because it has that substance and turned away, the light that would be its joy is the exact thing that scalds it. Bohm's point is that the pain is proof of origin. Nothing that wasn't built for the light could be hurt by it. Now put yourself in that. You don't experience your guilt as numbness. You don't experience it as distance or silence or God having left. You experience it as being seen. Something is looking at you and you can't get out of the way of it. And it's worst in the moments you're quietest and least distracted. That's illumination landing on a surface that can't take it yet, and the surface is the part that can change. Which gives you the practical consequence, and it's a relief if you follow it. If the light were blocked, your task would be demolition. Find the wall, break it, and you'd have no idea where to start, or whether you'd finished. It isn't blocked. Your task is to become something the light doesn't burn, and that's a task with steps. Which leaves the last question, and it's the one the whole video has been walking toward. If the work is mine, what did Christ do? Start with what he didn't do, because the cheap version of this has done enormous damage. There's a version of grace where a man repents on Tuesday and by Wednesday the thing has simply never happened. No residue, no repair, nothing owed to anyone. The lecture I'm drawing on has a word for that idea. It doesn't call it Christian, it calls it convenient. And Christ himself closes that door in the sentence right after the one about the adversary, the last farthing. That's his arithmetic, not mine. So here's the distinction, and it's the most useful thing I know on this subject. Your sin did two separate kinds of damage. It did something to you, it bent your character, and that bend is still in you, and straightening it is work only you can do. And it did something to the world. It left an actual mark out there in other people and in the earth itself, and that mark you cannot reach. You can't get back to 1997. You can't unsay it to a person who's dead. What Christ takes is the second one. The objective damage, the part beyond your reach, the debt you owe to creation rather than to yourself. He carries what you can't get back to, and he leaves you the part that was always yours to do, which is the transformation of the thing at the door. That's why Paul can write this sentence without contradicting a word of it, no condemnation, and Paul, who had men killed, does not then sit down for 30 years in front of his own record. He says one thing about it, and it's an instruction about direction. Not because it didn't happen, because he's got work. And the guardian's last words are the same instruction. It has stood there through the whole speech telling you it's made of you, and then it tells you what it wants. Not to hate it, not to erase it, to finish it. The thing waiting at your door is unfinished, and it's yours, and it's the only work nobody else can do for you. Every hour you've spent condemning yourself was an hour you were holding the chisel and refusing to cut. So do this tonight. Once, take the one you can't put down, don't argue with it, and don't forgive it. Ask it a different question, ask what it once made. Then make one thing, a call, a sentence, an hour spent differently. Small enough that you'll actually do it, that's the first cut. The door isn't locked, it's waiting on you to work.